Hey everyone, Michael Reynolds here from Massage Business Blueprint, and we are going to talk a little bit about expanding upon the retained earnings, the short-term savings concept. So organizing your retained earnings. So first of all, what is retained earnings? We defined this a little bit in the last column, but retained earnings is simply money you are keeping or retaining in your business, in your massage practice. This is money that you are not paying out to yourself or paying out to expenses. You are keeping it in the business. So the business jargon for this is called retained earnings, but you can think of it as short-term savings, just cash you keep in the bank, cash you keep in your savings account that you're keeping in the business for other things. So why do you want retained earnings? Why do you want short-term savings? For a number of things. One, it's an emergency fund. If something happens in your business, some sort of natural disaster, some sort of unforeseen occurrence that causes you to have a huge expenditure, or something you have to repair or throw some cash at to fix, that's your emergency fund. Just like a personal emergency fund, a business emergency fund is for things that are unforeseen, that come up in the business that have to be taken care of. Also, another reason to have retained earnings is for large purchases. You might want to buy a new massage table. You might want to take a continuing education class. You might want to move to a new office and expand your existing office. So there are a lot of reasons that you might think of for needing a chunk of cash to do something or to expand your business. That's what this is for large purchases. Also for sick pay and vacation pay. A lot of massage therapists retain money in their business for paying themselves for sick days or vacation days. If you want to take a vacation, you pay this out to yourself while you're not working. It just becomes your vacation pay. It's kind of like a PTO or paid time off program, like you would have at a corporate job, but you're creating it independently for your own business. Or if you're sick for a few days and can't work, you pay yourself from that sick pay account even while you're not working, just like you would have PTO time or paid time off at a regular corporate job. These are all great reasons to have retained earnings in your business. So, what accounts do you use for retained earnings? These should just be garden variety savings or money market accounts. These are not meant to be investments. These are not meant to be anything fancy. These are really just separate accounts for your retained earnings for these purposes. It's not meant to have interest or grow or be in the stock market or anything. It's meant to just be a place to hold money. So just use a garden variety savings account in your business, money market. Any business bank that you're using should have savings options or money market options for business. So open those for these accounts. So how do you organize these accounts? What are the layers in there? So I think one layer needs to be an emergency fund. So have a good, healthy chunk of that money set aside for emergency fund. This is really earmarked for things like real emergencies, things like, again, natural disasters or things that come up that are unforeseen, that are just sort of, hey, you need some cash to cover this emergency. Another layer should be for those large purchases, and another layer for PTO. When I say layers, I also mean potentially segmenting these accounts. So I generally combine the emergency fund and the large purchase account as one account. I put them in literally one bank account. I like that because it gets a little bit complex if you're segmenting too many different accounts. So if you have an emergency fund and then a large, like a short-term savings for large purchases on top of that, that generally covers the bases. Because if you have an emergency come along, you're just going to pull from that account and you're going to have to replenish it anyway, and what's left over becomes the emergency fund, and you're rebuilding your large purchase account. On the flip side, if you buy a piece of equipment or a new massage table or something, you're just taking a layer off from the short-term large purchase account, and the emergency fund is still there. So it's kind of the same money. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to segment that separately, in my opinion. So I would keep that as one account. Just know that if you're buying a massage table, that's your large purchase segment that you've earmarked. You want to build that back up. If it's a true emergency, then your emergency fund is being used for that purpose, and whatever was earmarked for large purchase then kind of becomes emergency fund, and then you rebuild the large purchase portion. So just kind of think of it as earmarked in your mind or labeled in your mind. I do like to keep a separate account for paid time off. I think that should be a separate account because that is a definitely different purpose, and it has a very specific dollar amount you're tying to. So whatever you decide you want to save up and pay yourself for, like how many sick days do you want to give yourself? How many vacation days do you want to give yourself? Decide on that and then put that much money in that particular account for those things. And then if you don't use it at the end of the year, if you haven't taken that many sick days or haven't taken that many vacation days, you're just rolling over. You're rolling over your sick and vacation pay, which usually doesn't happen in the corporate world. So you can kind of give yourself this nice perk of letting your vacation and sick days roll over to the next year. So keep budgeting as you would normally, keep putting the same amount in, but you can kind of bank up those rollover days, so to speak. Kind of a nice perk. So how much should you save in these accounts? My short answer is as much as possible. That's really my short answer. That's sort of a non-answer, but the reason I say that is no one ever really saves enough. And on the flip side, no one is ever mad about saving too much. Like you're not going to be upset if you oversave. Like for example, let's say you shoot for X number of months and you end up adding 2 or 3 more months onto that, and you have a lot more than you need. You're not going to be mad about that. So try to save as much as possible, and that's kind of just the simple, non-scientific rule of thumb. The more scientific or the more data-driven way to look at it is I would try for at least 6 months in your emergency fund. That may seem like a lot, but anything can happen. As we've seen recently, you can have any sort of natural disaster or things come up, and having 6 months in your emergency fund can go a long way toward giving you peace of mind and helping your business be resilient and have a strong foundation for planning for the unexpected. So I would shoot for 6 months in your emergency fund, and then everything on top of that 6 months of expenses can be used for large purchases. Again, that would be 6 months of operating expenses. So whatever it takes to operate your massage practice, including paying yourself, I would include in that 6 month time frame and build up that much cash in your business. It will take a while. It may take years to get there, but if you save a little bit every month and keep working toward it, eventually you can get to that 3 month mark, then the 4 and the 5 and the 6 month mark, and have a good, healthy emergency fund and savings. And then everything on top of that becomes large purchase. Now, as far as like when and how to use it, again, if you are purchasing a massage table or a new piece of equipment or a continuing education class, you want to make sure you are logically and intentionally using money for that intended purpose. So if you're still working on your emergency fund and you haven't gotten it to where you want it to be, let's say you decided 6 months or you decide it's going to be 4 months or whatever you decide, there's no right or wrong necessarily, it's up to you. But let's say you have not quite reached that point where you feel like your emergency fund is where it should be, then it's not the time to buy a new piece of equipment. It might be time to wait on that. So when you get to that point where you have X number of months in your emergency fund, and then you can start building on top of that for large purchases, when you have enough in that large purchase segment, that is when you buy equipment. And you can do it guilt-free by saying, hey, I've set aside money for this. I know exactly what it's for, and I'm using it intentionally. So that's what that money is for. So keep that in mind as you allocate and kind of label money for those specific purposes. So again, having a good, strong cash foundation is critical to being resilient in your massage practice. So you want to work on those accounts, build up that cash, keep that retained earnings in your business, and it will go a long way toward giving you a much stronger massage practice.